Social Studies. Chapter 14. The Great Declaration. Coming to a decision by the start of 1776, the argument with Great Britain had lasted more than 10 years. The fighting had gone on for almost one. Still, many colonists weren't sure whether they really wanted independence. A number of colonists opposed independence. These people were called Loyalists. Loyalists belonged to different religions and came from different social classes. They had different reasons for their loyalty. Some Loyalists made their decision for economic reasons. Some chose the British side for political reasons. Others followed religious or personal values. But all Loyalists agreed on one thing: they need to stay faithful to the king and to Great Britain. No colony had ever broken away from a mother country. Giving up a place in the world's greatest empire and all the advantages of being part of it, was that really a smart idea? On the other hand, patriots argued, shouldn't the colonists defend their rights and their liberties? It was a very tough decision. The decision became easier after Thomas Paine wrote a pamphlet called Common Sense. Paine had a great and rare skill. He could write about important ideas in everyday language. If you could read at all, you could understand common sense. Paine's pamphlet was read throughout the colonies. People talked about it in their homes, on street corners, and in taverns and inns. A lot of what Paine wrote was in fact plain common sense. He got readers to think about his ideas, not just by telling them what he thought, but by all asking what they thought. Did it make any sense for America to be ruled by a small nation 3,000 miles away? Did it make sense for people to be ruled by one man, a king, just because he was born into a certain family? Wouldn't it be better if the colonists chose their own rulers? Paine said that it was common sense for Americans to cut all ties to Great Britain. It was common sense for Americans to be independent and create a government of their own. Americans, they didn't need a king. They could live in a land where the law is king. The more they thought about it, the more Americans agreed. They didn't need the parliament and the king to rule them. They had plenty of experience in choosing their own leaders and ruling themselves. Perhaps it really was time then to separate and go their own way. The Declaration of Independence. In June 1776, the Second Continental Congress took up the question of independence. Congress agreed that the time had come to separate from Great Britain. The Congress chose a committee to write a declaration, or a statement. The purpose of the declaration was to explain why the colonies were breaking away from Great Britain. The committee chosen to write the declaration included John Adams, Benjamin Franklin, and Thomas Jefferson. Which committee member should do the main writing? Benjamin Franklin and George Washington were probably the two most famous Americans alive. John Adams was one of the first leaders to speak out in favor of independence. And Thomas Jefferson, however, he was known as a fine writer. Franklin and Adams chose him to write the Declaration. What Jefferson produced became the most famous document not only in American history, but also in the history of the entire world. Jefferson wanted the world to know all the bad things this king had done and all the rights that he had taken away. So he listed each of them. He also explained why the king's actions made it right for the colonists to break away from Britain. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Jefferson also stated that to secure these rights, governments are instituted or created. In other words, the reason we have governments is to protect our rights. What if a government doesn't protect those rights? What if it takes them away? Then, said Jefferson, people have the right to create new governments for themselves. That's what the people of the 13 colonies were now doing. On July 4th, 1776, Congress adopted this Declaration of Independence. On that day, the American colonies became independent states. Together, they made up the United States of America. Today, Americans celebrate July 4th as their Independence Day. During the next month, in towns and cities across the states, crowds gathered to hear the Declaration of Independence read aloud. Everywhere in the new United States of America, church bells rang out. Soldiers fired cannons and shot off guns. Citizens lit great bonfires in celebration. Meanwhile, back in Philadelphia, the delegates to the Second Continental Congress were more serious. The 56 men who signed the Declaration knew that if their revolution failed, the king would probably put them all to death. Benjamin Franklin explained the need for all of the new states to work together. "Gentlemen," he said, "we must all hang together, or else we should all hang separately."